determine election chaos in Berlin. What happens now? Irregularities and loopholes in the German capital on election day have shocked many observers. Even though the results might not be affected, candidates and parties could still bring legal challenges. Chaotic scenes and embarrassing irregularities at Berlin's ballot stations at last month's general election have shaken confidence in Germany's election system, while providing ammunition for the many people who question the German capital's bureaucratic efficiency. On Thursday, October 14th, final election results will be published, giving the green light for what are expected to be several legal challenges. On September the 26th, Berlin held elections at federal, state and local council levels, as well as a referendum on socializing major housing companies. This saw many voters in the German capital waiting for hours at voting stations as election volunteers ran out of ballot papers, or ballot papers were delivered to the wrong districts. The trouble had been predictable. Given the simultaneous elections, voters often spent several minutes in their booths sifting through 5 different ballot papers, and yet voting stations seemed unprepared, forced into ad hoc measures to ease the impasse. Extra booths were set up, while new ballots were sent from other voting stations, only for couriers to find their paths blocked by the international marathon that Berlin authorities allowed to go ahead on election day. The confusion appeared to lead to several violations of electoral rules. There were reports that volunteers offered to allow people in if they didn't mind only voting in the federal elections, or even turned voters away though they were in line at the cutoff time of 6 p.m. when stations officially closed. There have been no serious allegations of deliberate rigging, but confidence in the system has been shaken. I was probably like everyone else, fairly horrified and surprised, because there have never been mistakes and neglect to this extent in our elections. At least I can't remember anything like this, said Christian Pestalozzi, a member of Berlin State's Ethics Commission and law professor at the city's Free University. It's extremely serious. This is the most important action with which we can influence the composition of professional politics. And we have a right to demand that no mistakes are made. Such an accumulation of mistakes is disastrous. Loopholes left open, despite warnings. There have already been political consequences. The head of Berlin's election authority, Petra Michaelis, stepped down 3 days after the election, accepting responsibility for the fiasco. Berlin's Interior Minister Andreas Geisel has opened an investigation, the initial findings of which he sketched out in a statement released on October the 6th. In around 100 of Berlin's 2,245 polling stations, Geisel said there had been events that have to be investigated, especially in 3 of Berlin's most populous districts. Geisel insisted that the overall result of the state election would not be affected, but he did not rule out new elections in some districts. To the evident relief of Berlin politicians, it's unlikely that the chaos affected the national election, since only the local elections had different ballot papers from district to district. Berlin's outgoing mayor, Michael Müller, also insisted that the problems did not affect the results of the Berlin election. But he said at a press conference last week, "We have to admit it, there were mistaken assumptions and mistaken planning." A special parliamentary committee meeting came together to discuss the issue last Friday. Legal measures. But what legal steps could be taken after Thursday, when election results are finalized? Candidates and parties, though not voters, who think there are enough grounds to challenge the results can do so, and they could take the matter all the way to Germany's constitutional court. The courts must then decide whether the mistakes may have influenced the results. To know that, we'd have to know exactly what mistakes happened, and how many voters were affected, said Pestalozzi. Then there might have to be new elections, but not across Berlin, only in the districts affected. Legal challenges could also be hampered by lack of regulation. Wilko Zicht, who runs the non-profit electoral watchdog Wahlrecht, said the problem was that Germany lacks clear recount rules. In other countries, such as the US, when the margin is less than half a percentage point, there is an obligatory recount, he told DW. In Germany, if someone wins by only one vote, no one can demand a recount. You can only do that if you see clear procedural errors in the count. The burden of proof, therefore, is on the candidates.